Welcome back, dear friends. In the previous training we talked about different ways people benefit from ecosystem services and how they attach value to these services. We talked about different categories of the values, including use values, such as direct use and indirect use, option values, and non-use values, such as bequest, altruistic, and existence values. So, all these values that people attach to an ecosystem service form the total economic value of that forest ecosystem. And here, in this training, we will talk about how exactly to monetize the total economic value. Indeed, in the last training we asked the question how we can quantify different values within the total economic value framework. And actually this is needed for quantifying them and for demonstrating these values in decision making, in land use planning, and any policy regarding the management of a forest. In fact, we can do it. We can translate the economic values of ecosystem services into the universally understood language of money. And this is where different methods and techniques of economic valuation come to our aid. So, economic valuation of ecosystem services is a set of tools and methods that allow us to quantify the ecosystem services and transfer them into the language of money, so that we can use them in cost-benefit analysis, land use planning, environmental policy making, and so on. In other words, economic valuation of ecosystem services is the convenient way to assess and demonstrate the benefits and the value of ecosystem services, especially when there is no actual market for them. Generally, scientists define two broad categories of economic valuation techniques: revealed preference techniques and stated preference techniques. Revealed preference techniques allow you to see, to observe, or to reveal people's values for specific ecosystem services from the actual behavior they do to obtain these ecosystem services. For example, in the park or the forest, people go for recreation and they can pay entrance fee to that park or the forest, which indicates how much they value and willing to pay to access the recreational services. Certainly, you may understand that revealed preference techniques are very good in eliciting use values, but are not good in understanding and getting to quantify the non-use values, which do not have actual prices and market for them. In contrast, stated preference techniques are used to elicit both use and non-use values. And the approach is different. You actually ask people via questionnaires or face-to-face interviews or other methods how much they are willing to pay to preserve the forest and use it, or how much they are willing to accept compensation in case the forest is being cut down and the ecosystem services are lost. In this case, you can actually inquire how much people are willing to pay or accept compensation in terms of use values and non-use values. For example, in terms of the bequest value, you may ask people, how much are you willing to pay to preserve this forest for future generations? Each of these two types of economic valuation techniques have different methods how to approach the question of quantifying and demonstrating values of economic services. Let's look at the most common ones. In terms of reviewed preference techniques, we can look at the hedonic pricing method and the travel cost method. Hedonic pricing means that ecosystem services are part of some bundle of goods that are traded on the market, and we can estimate the value of ecosystem services within this bundle by comparing them to the equal goods without these ecosystem services. For example, we can consider the prices of houses that are located near this forest and compare them to the prices of houses located elsewhere, for example in the city. And then, comparing the prices for these two housing options, we can elicit the premium that people are willing to pay to live near this beautiful forest. Travel cost is another revealed preference method. It consists of the approach to estimate the value of ecosystem services from the prices or the value of associated goods required for people to access that ecosystem service. For example, if we want to estimate the recreational value of this forest, we can consider the number of visitors that the forest receives, let's say, per year, and then all the costs that people coming here incur when they try to reach this forest. For example, the value of time people need to get there, the price of the tickets to enter the forest, maybe the transportation costs, the price of the petrol, and purchases of food, snacks, drinks when they get there and enjoy the forest. Altogether, this can demonstrate how much people value in monetary terms the ecosystem services, the recreational value of ecosystem services in this forest. Speaking about the stated preference techniques, here we can mention two most commonly used methods. These are the contingent valuation and choice modeling or choice experiments. Both of these methods allow us to elicit use values and non-use values by asking people how much are they willing to accept compensation or are willing to pay for any changes that might occur to the forest ecosystem services. Contingent valuation is a stated preference technique where you actually ask people directly how much they're willing to pay or willing to accept compensation for a change in the provisioning and quality of an ecosystem service. Alternatively, you can offer people to choose between different bundles of attributes of ecosystem services, and then again ask them how much they're willing to pay for the preferred one or willing to accept compensation for least preferred option. In this way, for example, you can conduct a contingent valuation study and ask people, let's say, how much they're willing to pay for an environmental afforestation initiative that would increase the area of this forest, let's say, by 5%, and the diversity of tree species, let's say, by 10%. Choice modeling, or a variation of it called choice experiments, is another stated preference technique similar to contingent valuation. However, in this case, you do not ask people directly for their willingness to pay or willingness to accept compensation. You infer these values from their preferences and choices. And people express these preferences and choices in surveys, in direct interviews and other conversations with you, where you ask people to choose among different scenarios and the status quo option. These scenarios and the status quo scenario are grouped into various sets, so people go through each set and choose the option they most preferred or the scenario they like in each set. Each scenario in the set has a specific price, let's say, that allow you to then estimate the willingness to pay or willingness to accept compensation from each set. And by using economic or econometric models and estimations and calculations and software, you can then estimate the willingness to pay for whatever ecosystem services you're evaluating from people's choices and preferences. For example, we can estimate, let's say, the biodiversity of this forest and how people appreciate it from such a choice modeling questionnaire and research. So you may present scenarios to people where you show how much the biodiversity would increase if certain schemes or plans would be implemented in the forest. Each scenario again has specific price associated to it, and then you can actually estimate from all the answers the preferred scenario or the preferred method that people would like to be implemented in this forest and how much they're willing to pay for increasing the biodiversity here. In fact, this is what we did in the Codru Quest project that we realized in 2017. We, the researchers at Mega, used choice modeling and specific variation of its choice experiments to estimate the direct use and non-use values of ecosystem services and biodiversity conservation in the Codru Quest forest and the Codru Nature Reserve. Certainly, there are many more economic valuation techniques worth talking about, and there are many more things to know how to apply them in practice. Therefore, we encourage you to research more on this topic and also to see the reference list for this course. There you will also find the report from our Codru Quest project, examples of our questionnaire that we used, and the models and data sets that you can also look through to understand how we applied the choice modeling method and estimated the exact values of ecosystem services in the Codru forest. But as we learn more about the values of ecosystem services and economic valuation techniques to estimate these values, many more questions arise. For example, why do we need all this complexity of various techniques and methods to estimate the value of the forest? And why do we need to do it in the first place? Then, if people value forests so much and are willing to pay to protect them, then why are we losing the forest ecosystems? Why are they degrading? And finally, how can we stop or prevent the threats to forests and forest ecosystem services? We will help you answer this question in the next training of the course. See you later!